Hey guys, it's been a hot minute and I want to apologize for that. I have just finished moving, still getting stuff up on the walls and whatnot, but I'm getting settled in and I'm hoping that will mean I'll be able to continue putting out videos, especially related to the tumor. This video specifically is going to be about the immediate aftermath after my craniotomy and what the initial healing process was like, what issues I may have come across, and so I hope that ends up being helpful for some of you guys. Just a quick aside, I will also be posting another video where I do a week by week post-craniotomy healing, I guess, review, because I took pictures weekly of my healing process that I didn't talk about in the initial recording. So in this next video that I'm going to be posting, I'll be going over about 7 or 8 weeks of images of my face, because my face had swollen a little bit, my eye was obviously swollen, and my scar was in the healing process. So you'll get to see what that's about if you are sensitive to those kinds of images. It does look like I have a black eye throughout most of that, and you can see the scar through the entire thing, but by week 4 it essentially just looks like a scab. The first 3 weeks are the worst of it, and I got my staples out by week 4 as well. So if you want more visual cues and references as to what the healing process was like, I do give a little bit more insight about that, but that will be for the next video. I do also want to reiterate the fact that this is a very personal experience for me, even if you have the exact same condition that I have and your pre-operation experience is the exact same that mine was. There's no saying what your individual experience is going to be like, so I don't want anybody to watch this video and be like, oh, this is exactly how it's gonna happen for me. Everybody's body is different and neurosurgeons perform differently. They're different also. Of course, there is a standard of procedure that they gotta follow, but the results may not be the exact same, and I just wanna make sure people are prepared to have a different experience than I have. So the craniotomy happened. I wasn't conscious during it, and it actually ended up taking a few hours longer than expected. It's possible that they told me why. I don't recall. I was pretty fucking out of it while I was in the hospital, so it didn't really sound like it was anything super crazy. But that being said, my visitor wasn't able to visit immediately after the craniotomy happened. He had to wait until the day afterwards. Hopefully that won't be an issue for you. Just know that if something unexpected does happen, your visitor may have to delay actually visiting you in person. One thing I was warned of in advance was that they were going to temporarily remove the part of my brain that regulated language production. So they were trying to have me prepare for having a hard time speaking afterwards, after the craniotomy. That wasn't an issue for me at all. I like to think that the nurses and the doctors got tired of how much I just would not shut the fuck up. My left eye was extremely swollen afterwards. I couldn't open my eye at all. I had a hard time opening my eye for like a week afterwards, and even then, like, it only slowly started to open little by little. And then it was extremely sensitive to light. Whenever I came out of the craniotomy and I was conscious, they had to come in and check to make sure I wasn't concussed, check to make sure that my nerves were working and my pupils were dilating like normal. So they actually had to pry my eye open and shine a light in there, and that was awful, but it was super brief. I understood why they had to do it. I'm thankful that they did that, but that sucked big time. It was extremely useful for me having button-up shirts, so I didn't have to worry about pulling anything over the injury at all. So having a shirt like this that you can button up and unbutton and whatnot to help you whenever you gotta shower, or maybe you gotta change, what have you. You'll be wearing a hospital gown for the operation, so don't worry about that. And definitely don't worry about bringing any bras with you to the hospital. If anybody expects you to wear a bra, they're not a real ally. Aside from having the light shined in my eye, the absolute worst part of the hospital visit was the catheter. It was only required for the first couple of days. It was supposed to stay in for a couple of days longer, but they pretty much told me I would have to have the catheter in until I am able to reliably get up and walk to the bathroom on my own. So a catheter is essentially a tube that's put into your bladder through your urethra. Again, very uncomfortable. I can only imagine it's worse for guys, but it's just to make sure that you don't piss your pants during surgery and immediately after surgery while you're adapting to your new normal. So again, it is absolutely necessary that you have the catheter, but it was very uncomfortable for me, but it did give me extra motivation to work myself up to going to the bathroom. And I was able to stand up and walk pretty reasonably within the first couple of days. And so since I was so motivated to get that done, I was able to convince them to take it out a couple of days early. So I was expected to stay in the hospital for 5 or more days. I think sheer motivation and willpower on my end helped me adjust to my new normal a little bit more quickly, and so I was able to get out on day 3. I do think that COVID also had them wanting to get people out a little bit more quickly, so I wouldn't be surprised even if you are motivated and able to walk by day 3, they might have you stay a little bit longer just to make sure things are normal for you. Just know that depending on how things go, you might be there a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. For your sake, I hope you're able to get out of there quickly. So again, this may be different for other people, but I was immediately after prescribed steroids to help with the swelling, anti-seizure medication just as a precautionary thing, and I think pain medication, opioids. And honestly, the opioids were the one I was the most concerned about. I have seen addiction in its face and it is terrifying, so I think the only time I took the opioids was whenever I had the super mega migraine, and then I was like, okay, that's done, I can deal with the rest. That being said, it also helps that I can't feel this part of my face at all, so if you do end up needing to take pain medications, don't feel bad about it. Just make sure you're taking them as prescribed, and if you are concerned about addiction at all, make sure you talk with your doctor about that and maybe create some sort of support system that can help you out, worst case scenario. Before my craniotomy, I actually slept on my wedge pillow that I got with my HSA card. I got used to sleeping on my wedge pillow on my back before my craniotomy because I didn't want it to be an issue of me adjusting from sleeping on my side or sleeping on my belly, and then after the craniotomy not being able to fall asleep because I wasn't used to sleeping on my back on my wedge pillow yet. So I adjusted to that beforehand, and so it wasn't too much of an issue. Plus, since my body was recovering, I was constantly exhausted and constantly napping anyway. I had some specific restrictions. I wasn't allowed to lift anything that was 10 pounds or more for, I think, 2 weeks or so. I think until I got my staples taken out. So I wasn't able to lift anything, and I wasn't supposed to bend at the hip. So whenever I was doing dishes, I had to consciously bend at my knees to pick the dishes up and put them up and whatnot. Take everything super slowly because blood flow is going to be a little bit different, and you do not want to pass out in that situation. Or honestly, you don't want to pass out in any situation, but this situation especially. So if you have help around the house, only do stuff that you feel up to doing. I kind of got tired of being in bed all day, so that's why I was doing dishes and whatnot. But if you are able to try to get your groceries delivered, and if you have any roommates or anything, try to have them help you move stuff. And as frustrating as it was for me, I try to be as independent as possible. My partner, now spouse, had to make sure to remind me of my limitations, because I want to be like, oh, I can lift all of the things, but in that scenario I wasn't able to, and if I had tried, I could have strained something that would have made things a lot worse. So put your pride aside and take as much help as you are able to. So during the craniotomy, I believe they had to cut part of my jaw muscle and my temporal muscle. You can actually see this side is more full than this side. I think they had to cut some of this muscle and they had to cut some of this muscle. So chewing for me was really difficult. And on top of that, I wasn't able to feel the left side of my face at all. And I still, to this day, years later, can't really feel the left side of my face. And I'll get into that more in a minute. But chewing was really hard for me, and I still only chew on the right side of my mouth because I'm terrified of biting my left cheek and not realizing it because I can't really feel it. So just make sure you're taking your time while you're chewing if something like that happens to you, if you have sensory issues, if you have jaw issues, if they happen to cut part of your jaw, it's gonna take a little bit longer for you to chew. So they didn't cut every single jaw muscle in the left side of my face or every single temporal muscle on the left side of my face. They only cut a select few that they needed to in order to gain access to the areas of the brain that they needed to gain access to, right? Because some of the jaw muscles are now out of function, the other jaw muscles really had to work extra hard to compensate for that. So again, for the first couple of weeks, these muscles were extremely tense because they were being overworked like crazy, and it got to the point where I wasn't able to open my mouth very wide. So again, eating really difficult. Eventually I was able to open my mouth a little bit wider, but it like shifted where my jaw went one way or the other. I don't remember which way my jaw shifted, but I'll include a picture here. So as you can see, the lack of jaw muscle on my left side made it so that my jaw wasn't aligned anymore, and that's something that I've slowly been working on, and I continuously do, and I still do to this day, exercises where I'll look at myself in the mirror and I'll open my jaw slowly, trying to keep it in line. And even now you can see my jaw's like trying to pull one way or the other, and I have to actively and consciously think about that in order to make sure it stays in line. But that stuff has kind of resolved over time, but that it's through a lot of exercises and conscious decision making. I mentioned this in my last video, or one of my last videos, but it could get to a point where chewing is actively difficult and makes it hard for you to motivate yourself to eat, in which case I would encourage you get some like Ensure or nutritional shakes or something like that, just to make sure your body is getting the nutrition it needs so it can heal as quickly as possible. Another thing that came with the loss of physical sensation on the left side of my face was I lost my ability to taste sweet and sour things as strongly as I did before. And that further made it more difficult for me to find motivation to eat because I'm kind of a foodie and my biggest vice is sugar. I love sweets, I love cookies. That kind of made it a little harder for me, especially when it comes to the depression aspect of it all. I wasn't really able to go out and about because on top of the craniotomy, it was COVID. I just want to specify COVID is still around, but the restrictions were more prominent then than they are now. So I still encourage people to mask up, especially if you're coming out of a major surgery, if you're leaving the house, if you're going to be around people, mask up for your own sake and for the people around you. Anyway. But yeah, not having the sensation of sweetness, not being able to taste like sugar and honey and whatnot as well, kind of messed with my depression a little bit. Because that's just like one of those little treats in life, being able to taste all of your food and enjoy it to extreme. But thankfully, that wasn't a problem for long. But I had a friend come over a couple of weeks after my craniotomy, and he bought me a piece of cherry pie. And up to this point, I was having issues with taste, but I took a bite of that and all of a sudden it felt like all of my taste buds were stimulated again. It was the sweetest and most tart thing I had ever tasted in my life. And it was honestly, it was a shock to the system. So if somebody is born deaf or blind, or they are missing any sort of sensation, they can do things like get cochlear implants to help them hear or get certain eye surgeries to help them see, but If they've already adapted to the lack of sensation, then suddenly being able to hear or suddenly being able to see is actually really traumatic. And that's not something that a lot of able-bodied individuals realize, that some people who suddenly gain the ability to hear, they get really depressed afterwards. It's a total shift in life. It wasn't that dramatic for me because I had tasted before, and it had only been a couple of weeks since I had last tasted sweet and sour stuff, but I was literally crying because it was such a strong sensation. So if you lose any of your sensations and you end up getting them back later on, be prepared for that to be a shock to your system, because like it was a lot. It was a lot. A couple days after I got home, I ended up having a super ultra mega migraine, the worst I've had, and I am not unfamiliar with migraines. I took some pain meds which were prescribed to me for the craniotomy, and I took a nice hot bath. I was able to get my then partner, now spouse, to give me a neck and shoulder rub. That was really nice. It got a little bit better, but it lingered for a couple of days. Whenever I had my post-op appointment and saw my neurosurgeon, I brought this up to him, and he says it's because I had to have my head turned like this for 5+ hours while they were working on the craniotomy. Having your neck in one position for that long can really mess with some of the neck muscles. So if you haven't had your craniotomy yet, I do encourage you maybe spend a week or two doing some neck stretches. Maybe it's a good idea to just do that stuff anyway, but that's something that I dealt with, and maybe neck stretches will be good. I used Tiger Balm. I love Tiger Balm. That was really helpful. Just want to give you a heads up on that one. And I think because of my neck needing to be turned for 5 to 8 hours during the craniotomy, I also noticed that I had an increase in muscle spasms in my left shoulder, and that was really rough too. So that probably contributed to the migraine as well. If you already suffer from muscle spasms, maybe talk to your doctor about things that you can do to mitigate that, and have a backup plan just in case. Muscle spasms are no fun. I had already had muscle relaxers because, like I said, muscle spasms are something I'm relatively familiar with. I tend to steer clear of the muscle relaxers unless it's a really dire case, and after calling my neurosurgeon's office and clearing with them that it's okay for me to resume taking these muscle relaxers, I did take those muscle relaxers, and that helped with the pain a decent amount. But again, make sure you're doing everything as prescribed and clearing it with your doctors, because some medications have they combat other medications. So if you take 2 of a certain medication at the same time, it could hinder the impact of one or make the other one more severe. So I'm not going to get into it. I'm not a doctor, but talk to your doctors about that stuff. After a couple of weeks, after the swelling of the eye went down, I was noticing that my eye was still pretty sensitive to light, so I would still take advantage of having an eye patch if it was especially light out. To this day, I still have issues in the cold. My eye actually almost freezes up. It dries up a little bit when it is below freezing, even when it's just 40 degrees out. So I keep that eye patch around if it helps with keeping things warm in my eye. I saw an eye doctor. I think they're called ophthalmologists. Optometrist? I don't know. Anyway, I saw an eye doctor a few months later, and he said that it looked like I had this thing called optic atrophy, which is where your eye nerve starts to decay, essentially. It starts to shrivel up a little bit. But it was really, really slow progressing, so he just suggested if my eye is having issues producing its own moisture, I get, preservative-free eye drops. So I did that, and I used those for the past few years. I saw an eye doctor again a couple of months ago, and he said, Yeah, the optic atrophy is fine. It's not a problem anymore. I guess my eye just like magically healed itself. So that's pretty cool. But I do, again, still have issues, especially when it's cold out. So I keep those eye drops around just in case. Another thing that I noticed with my eyes was specific to vision. So immediately after the craniotomy, I did have double vision. It took a while for me to notice because my left eye was swollen. But I had double vision for a couple of weeks, and I could slowly like see the two images coming together over the course of those couple of weeks. Every now and then I still get flashes of double vision, but it's usually when I'm straining my eyes in one direction or another. So if I am facing this way and looking that way, or vice versa, and then sometimes when I'm like looking down, I will still get flashes of double vision. Couple of months after my craniotomy, I actually noticed that part of the double vision was due to my left eye having a slower time to adapt to fields of vision. So let's say you look out a window and there's a screen in the window, and you're focused on the screen, and then you decide to look at the things beyond the window. So behind the screen you see trees or birds or what have you. I would notice that I would look at the screen and it would be normal, and then I would look beyond the screen and my right eye would be able to see the trees, but my left eye would still be seeing the screen, and it took it quite a bit longer to readjust its focus to see beyond the screen and start looking at the trees. I think that my left eye may still have a little bit of a delay in that adaptation, but it's not super noticeable, especially in comparison to what it was the first couple of months. And because I was having vision issues immediately after the surgery, I ended up opting out of taking notes and journaling, and I mostly just focused on meditating and resting and doing puzzles. Because I had some shifts in my vision pre-craniotomy and post-craniotomy, I wanted to take my time when driving. So I had my spouse do all of the driving for the first few weeks, and then after that I essentially pretended like I was in driver's ed again, and I had my spouse drive me to an empty parking lot, and I drive around a little bit just to make sure my vision wasn't messing with me. Honestly, I probably didn't need that much, but again, I had the privilege of taking things slow, so I took advantage of that, and I encourage you to do the same if you are able to, but also understand not everybody has those same privileges. I also had to get used to driving with sunglasses, because I never did that, but since my left eye specifically was especially sensitive to sunlight, and it still is, I ended up buying 1 million pairs of sunglasses over the past couple of years, and I never drive without them. Even on some cloudy days, my eyes can still be really sensitive to sunlight or the whatever's trickling in through the clouds, so I keep sunglasses on me all of the time. Going back to physical sensations, I know that I said I can't feel the left side of my face, and for the most part that's true. Whenever I do this, I can feel the tugging of the skin. But if I do this, I can't feel the scratching of my nail. So it's like, I don't feel pain by any means. It's almost kind of like when you go to the dentist and you get part of your face numbed, but you get used to it over time because it doesn't go away. So like, I can feel the tugging of the skin, can't feel the pinching of my nail. Nothing like that. I can feel, the further away from the center of my face it gets, I feel a little bit more, so I can feel like pinching over here. And it goes like straight down the middle, so I can feel pinching over here. I just can't feel pinching over here. So that being said, be cautious of exposure. If you want to get a facial piercing of sorts, I would steer clear of getting as contradictory as this may sound, I would steer clear of getting any facial piercings on the side of your face that you cannot feel, because if that piercing gets tugged or pulled on, if it gets caught in something, you might not realize it and accidentally yank that out, and that is terrifying to me. Another sensory thing that I wasn't expecting was doing my makeup. So after my craniotomy, obviously my main goal is not to attract a million people to my doorstep and tell me that I'm beautiful or whatever, but I have a fun time doing my makeup. So a couple of weeks after my eye was starting to decrease in swelling, I did my makeup. But I can't feel the left side of my face, and that includes eyelashes. I had no clue how much eyelash sensation is needed when applying mascara. So there were definitely a fair amount of times where I just accidentally just shoved the mascara right into my eye, and I didn't realize it until I took it away and there was a big black glob on my eye. Sounds really gross, but I couldn't feel it, so it was fine. Yeah, I just rinsed my eye out, it was fine. Another thing that was kind of weird as I started to recover from this craniotomy was my nasal cavity on the left side. I didn't have any sensation there to begin with, or immediately after the craniotomy either, and I started to gain that sensation back, which I am thankful for, but it was, again, extra sensitive as I was gaining back that sensation, so my body felt like the left side of my body was sick while the right side of my body wasn't. And I think that comes down to thinking that things are especially dry, feeling things are especially dry in my nasal cavity when previously I didn't feel anything. Or maybe it felt extra not dry and gross. I don't recall. I just wrote some brief stuff down in my journal and I'm kind of going off of that. But yeah, just knowing that as you recover, as you gain sensation or lose sensation, things may be a bit more of a shock to your system than maybe you initially assumed that it would be. A month after the craniotomy, I got to talk to my neurosurgeon's nurse practitioner, and I was put in the clear to do a lot of different things. I could start working out again. I didn't have to sleep on the wedge pillow. I was able to go back to work, which I didn't want to, but I needed the money, so I started going back for half days. And again, COVID, so we were able to work from home most of the time. So I think after just a few weeks, you should be able to start living a pretty normal life again, although things may still feel very different, and your vision may still be a little bit off or something like that. I definitely continued taking my vitamins after the craniotomy, and I continued meditating, and I continued doing stretches as much as possible, especially when I realized the muscle spasms in my left shoulder were getting worse, and I think those things combined really helped me get a good sense of self back in flow. I definitely also approached the entire situation from a place of curiosity, and I think that helped me a lot too. So instead of being generally upset about why I have double vision, I'd approach it from a curiosity perspective, and I would experiment with what does this do? What does that do? And I try to deduce what conclusions I could come to realistically based off of whatever experimentation I was doing on myself. And of course I kept things reasonable. I wasn't trying to let's see how long I can touch my left eye sort of situation. But if you're able to approach things from a place of curiosity, I think that has potential to help you maintain a more positive outlook on whatever situation you are finding yourself in. I ended up returning to work just a month after my craniotomy, and that definitely put a damper on some of my mental health because I wasn't able to focus just exclusively on painting, puzzles, recovery, and needlessly horny anime that talks about food. Food Wars is great. I don't know, man. Anyway, having to devote such a large part of my life back into making money, it was necessary, but it was still a huge damper on life's expectations in this capitalistic society. Like, my brain had just been invaded a month before, and I'm being expected to, out of necessity, go back to work for this capitalistic system, which genuinely does not care about my well-being. Heaven forbid I was still in pain. Heaven forbid, instead of numbness on the left side of my face, I was constantly in pain. It would have taken me so much longer to adapt to that, but I wouldn't have been able to afford to live without going back to work regardless. So that was, you know, some pretty radicalizing but brutal realizations that I had then, and that was also really depressing. But I did have the fortune of having a good support system behind me, and I was able to lean on them pretty heavily, and people were really happy to help out where they could. So yeah, you know, if you have a good support system, lean on them as much as you can, and don't feel bad about it. But that pretty much sums up my first month and a half of recovery, and then things kind of slowed down from there. I am still experiencing some stuff a few years later, and I will get to that in the next video and talk about some of my more interesting long-term experiences. I hope to see you there. If I don't, you know, that's fine. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Hopefully I was able to answer some of your questions. If you have more questions, by all means, please leave them in the comments. I can't promise I'll be able to get back to them swiftly, and also make sure you're asking your doctors these questions, because there's a good chance they'll have a better idea of how this would all play out for you, since you are your own individual with your own body that functions totally different from mine. But also, I would love to continue building community with you guys. I really appreciate the questions that you've come up with, and it has definitely helped me not feel so alone, because even after more than a decade of having experience with a trigeminal schwannoma, I still hadn't met anybody who had one. So it's been nice talking to some of you guys. So thank you for that. Whatever you're going through, I hope things are going well, and I hope this video has helped in one way or another. I'll see you on the other side.